Bet Eck. You'll be followed by Joanne Williams.
Hi, I'm Betty Eck. My main criticism of the S-Guys is that it's very, very long. But it never asks or answers the most fundamental question of all. That question is fracking morally right? If not, it must be banned. Something that is fundamentally wrong cannot be made right by regulating it. As Sandra Steingraber has put it so well, it's like trying to create rules to make slavery acceptable. Is it appropriate to weigh the moral aspects? I say yes. We deal with moral issues when we pass laws to protect people from harm, when we decide the punishments for those who break these laws. Our Constitution is based on moral principles defining the basic rights of human beings. So how do we judge the morality of fracking? Here's a few ways. Fracking endangers the welfare of children and other living things. If there was no risk of harm to anyone, why did the industry get itself exempt from at least a dozen environmental regulations that exist to protect children and other living things? The fracking industries are operating as predators. Predators, whether in the wild or society, go after those who are most vulnerable. When the predators on Wall Street managed to trash the economy, vast numbers of people were wounded. Worry over lost homes and jobs makes us easy prey for those who promise economic salvation. Continuing and expanding the use of fossil fuels presents a huge barrier, not a bridge, to the development of renewable energy. We are shamefully behind many other nations in this regard and shamefully continue to be one of the world's biggest contributors to global warming. Isn't morality an issue here? The power of an industry undermines democracy when our politicians become its puppets. It seems ironic to me that we celebrate the budding democracies in what we call the Arab Spring, yet we seem to be entering the American winter as our own country moves into the direction of something that's hard to call a democracy. So DEC people, please ponder these issues, then make your recommendations. Your new document will be a whole lot shorter.
Thank you. Joanne Williams, to be followed by Brendan Woodcuff.
Thank you. I'm Joanne Williams, and thank you for allowing us to have this forum to speak to you. I am a farm owner in this area, and I am legitimately concerned about my land and water quality. The opportunity for creating jobs for sustained economic growth in the southern tier sets beneath our feet. It is an opportunity like no other this area has ever seen before and may never see again. It is natural gas. We must press our representatives and senators in Albany to get the SGEIS finalized without further delay so that drilling permits can be issued to the natural gas company to drill safely. Companies are waiting and eager to develop this great resource. It will benefit everyone, not just landowners, small business, housing, construction, hotel and motel, restaurant, service supplies, and consumers, plus many others. It is a win-win situation that can have an immediate positive impact in our local and state economy for many years to come. Look at how the residents and state of Pennsylvania have been positively affected. The Northeast Driller out of Towanda, Pennsylvania, published the following data on 8/30/11. In 2010, Pennsylvania Marcellus drilling activity triggered $11.2 billion in economic activity. It generated $1.1 billion in state and local taxes and supported 140,000 jobs. It is expected to generate $12.8 billion in economic activity in 2011, with $1.2 billion in state and local taxes, and support 156,000 jobs. Residential natural gas and electric bills were lowered $245.1 million, 217.4 of which was natural gas and 27.7 was electric. Vacant rentals are basically non-existent and rent prices have increased. 3-bedroom homes rent for $1,500 to $2,400. No economy needs this, our economy needs this badly. Please contact Governor Cuomo and DEC Commissioner Martens and urge them to not allow any further delay in finalizing the SGEIS, issuing drilling permits now. Hydrofracking can be done safely with DEC guidelines and monitoring. 3.5 years is long enough.
Thank you. Folks, let's be respectful of all the speakers here, regardless of whether you agree with their positions. Brendan Woodruff.
Yep. Thank you. My name is Brendan Woodruff. I'm a lifelong upstate New York resident. I am the Marcellus Shale campaign organizer for the New York Public Interest Research Group. NYPIRG is New York State's largest nonpartisan research and advocacy organization and has long been active in protecting New York's health and environment. We are here today because the draft supplemental generic environmental impact statement released in 2009 was woefully inadequate at analyzing and mitigating potential impacts from this industrial activity, prompting Governor Patterson to issue Executive Order number 41 in December 2010, which has since been confirmed by Governor Cuomo, calling for further review. Specifically, this executive order instructed DEC to, quote, make such revisions to the draft SGIS that are necessary to analyze comprehensively the environmental impacts associated with high-volume hydraulic fracturing combined with horizontal drilling, ensure that such impacts are appropriately avoided or mitigated, consistent with the State Environmental Quality Review Act, other provisions of the Environmental Conservation Law and other laws, and ensure that adequate regulatory measures are identified to protect public health and the environment. However, we believe the revised draft SGEIS does not fulfill the requirements of the executive order and does not provide the needed assurances the New Yorkers' health and environment will be safe. The revised SGIS does not adequately address a number of key issues, including cumulative impacts, public health impacts, and proper disposal of the toxic and possibly radioactive wastewater. Instead, the revised draft SGIS allows for the use of toxic chemicals, provides setbacks from drinking water supplies that either sunset and or can be waived, provides for the possibility of drilling near New York City's aging watershed infrastructure, and leaves local communities vulnerable. One of the key shortcomings of the SGIS that I would like to focus my comments on is the lack of a true assessment of the impacts that hydrofracking could have on local communities. One of the rights long enjoyed by communities in New York has been the ability to control their destinies through home rule and local zoning. Despite claims from DEC that town approval is needed and therefore they are provided a layer of protection, towns are at risk. Not only are they not able to control whether the DEC decides to permit drilling within their borders, but the revised SGIS does not adequately address the impacts that this activity will have on local roads or emergency response units. Drilling will increase the workload of local emergency services, most of which are 100% volunteer and have seen their numbers dwindle in recent times. Along with the risk of exposing these first responders to any number of toxins, many of these local service units do not have the equipment or necessary training to handle the new potential emergencies that may come with hydrofracking. Overall, there are many reasons to be concerned about the state's position on hydrofracking. You have opted to fast-track the process instead of following Executive Order number 41 and undertaking a true environmental review. And in the end, we ask that this SGIS be withdrawn. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mary Menapace, to be followed by Rema Lowe.
Good evening. My name is Mary Menapace, and I'm a public health nurse, and I work with pregnant women. And I have a lot of issues with the SGIS, but I'm going to discuss 3 here. I live in Skaneateles, so I'd like to discuss the Skaneateles watershed, non-disclosure agreements, and public health. Skaneateles, I will trust the DEC that a 4,000-foot setback from our watershed, the bounds of our watershed, might be reasonable protection from our water. But it can't be about just drilling. It's no protection at all unless all surface activity, including truck traffic and storing of toxic waste, is entirely banned. Thousands of trucks carrying hazardous chemicals and toxic waste running our lake roads, which are major thoroughfares north and south, pose an unacceptable risk of a devastating spill contaminating one of the cleanest lakes in the country and drinking water supply to over 80,000 people. And I would like to ask the DEC for rationale on how an unfiltered rural water well contaminated is less of a financial hardship for a farmer than an unfiltered municipal drinking water source contaminated is for a city. Mandate consistency and fairness. 4,000-foot setbacks from all unfiltered water sources then. Every aquifer, every river, every lake, and every stream that supplies unfiltered drinking water to every person, every animal, and any species of plant, all living beings, 4,000-foot setbacks. Non-disclosure agreements. Chesapeake Energy drilled 13 wells in my neighborhood. Two families signed non-disclosure agreements, which were confirmed by farmers nearby, and one of the families actually knows about this. They are a public health risk. We need to fix it. Maybe that's a legislative fix, maybe it's the Attorney General, but in Pennsylvania, they dealt with it with new reporting regulations. We must mandate immediate reporting of any spill, accident, or landowner complaint in a universally accessible database that can be vetted later for accuracy, but that would effectively do away with non-disclosure agreements. And public health, I'll speak here for the children. The SGICE has glaring omissions. Gotta switch my, this is from the Pediatric Environmental Health Specialist Unit Network. Continued surveillance of water quality, noise levels, and air pollution in areas where natural gas extraction occurs, totally absent from the SGICE. Monitoring the health impacts of persons living in the area, preferably with cohort studies, absent in the SGICE. Increasing awareness of community health care providers, especially on the health consequences of exposures and workers, absent in the SGICE. Disclosure of all chemicals, not just, don't save any proprietary, absent in the SGICE. And as an invaluable resources for their local, state, health, and regional communities, health professionals should advocate for human health effects, absent on your panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Roma Loeb, and the next speaker will be Susan Dorsey.
I'm Rima Loeb. I'm a landowner in Afton. We've lived there for more than 35 years. The DEC can be compared to a mythical two-headed monster, with one part being charged with protecting New York's environment, the other tasked with developing mineral resources. This creates a conflict of interest. As we observed last summer in the case of the BP blowout and oil spill, this does not work. The federal authorities could not properly regulate the industry. Two masters cannot be served well. Reading the SGICE convinces one that the master better served is the gas industry, with its money and political influence. While this comment does not refer to any one section of the SGICE, it pertains to the entire document. Even if the problem of limited finances to carry out its duties were resolved, the DEC cannot fill both missions at the same time. A restructuring of the department is needed. That which is wrong from the beginning cannot be made right. And I just wanted to add, there's so much wrong with this, and you're going to hear from this person, for whatever it's worth, by mail, and more mail, and more mail. There is so much wrong. The concepts here, you know, this is not a clean fuel when you're letting methane off that's more powerful than the carbon. Don't you care about greenhouse gases and our planet? I can move from New York State, and I probably will if you guys go ahead. So will many other people. But I can't move.
Again, folks, do not applaud during the comments.
I cannot move, and neither can you, from this planet that is our home. Let's start thinking sensibly.
Thank you. Susan Dorsey, to be followed by John Kopalik.
My name is Susan Dorsey, and these comments are from me personally and do not reflect any view of any organization to which I may belong. Imagine someone sees your assets for 3.5 years without an end in sight. How does it feel? We are land rich, but cash poor. Our land is our net worth. Now explain to me the kitchen sink approach allowing special interest groups to write and foreign interests to comment on the rules under which I may harvest my resources. This document unfortunately satisfies no one. It ignores the harsh reality that delay has imposed undue, intolerable hardship on the class of people who are the backbone of upstate. People who would rather not go to meetings like this to tell others how to run their lives, but expect the same common courtesy in return. And when they're not awarded it, they have too good of an upbringing to do anything but ignore those who have insulted them and belittled their ability to make their own decisions, to govern their own lives and property responsibly, as they have been doing for generations. Landowners place their trust in a system that is failing them. If this draft is finalized, the opponents of gas development will have succeeded in creating their own reality of a balkanized industrial landscape, and then self-righteously will say, "We told you so." This draft will bust up the negotiating power of landowner coalitions and all that we have worked for the past 4 years. We have amassed hundreds of thousands of contiguous acres for development, but that won't matter when not the big bad oil industry, but the work of our own DEC funded by our own tax dollars, cherry picks acreage to be developed. Setbacks leave a patchwork of drillable land and eliminate any hope of optimal use and minimal waste of the resource, which is your mandate to preserve. If anything is effectively manipulating land values, it's these proposed regulations. Landowner coalitions have written pages of protective addenda to the gas company's boilerplate leases. Laws can be overturned, regulations revised, but the lease endures. It's the legal instrument, binding for as long as the gas is produced. Our coalition leases are stronger than the document we've waited so long for, but all of the precautions we've hammered out will be tossed aside when individual coalition members must sign any offer to keep their homes because of justice delayed, meddling with the capitalist system, and failure to have faith in the people who have safeguarded our land for generations. Thank you.
Thank you. John Kopala, to be followed by Kathy Kenny.
Good evening. My name is John Kopalik. I'm a 61-year resident of this happy valley. And I just want to assure everyone here and the DEC as well that chemical hydrofracking is very safe. The federal government has told us that. They also brought us open-air nuclear bomb testing, Agent Orange, and thalidomide. All these things created a tremendous amount of jobs, but they were mostly in the health and cancer care industries. Most cancer clusters, let's be reminded, take 50 years to be recognized. On the issue of wastewater disposal, our source of news here is by and large a Gannett publication called The Press. One of the articles, Barbara Fiali espoused there would be 2,000 gas wells drilled in Broome County. A recent Gannett article revealed it takes approximately, from an industry expert, 4.5 million gallons of water per well. Now that's pretty simple math. That's 9 billion gallons of water from Broome County alone, 9 billion gallons. It's been suggested that this can be injected into deep wells. And I guess my question, one of the questions of DEC, can you sequester 9 billion gallons of water forever? And what are the effects, on, if you could, on our hydrosphere of taking 9 billion gallons out? I'm not going to ramble on, but I'm just going to ask a simple question to the DEC. Has Broome County and the southern tier of New York been sold for scrap? Thank you.
Thank you.
And gas companies doing business in New York. We thank you for this opportunity and hope the agency's efforts result in a credible and scientifically defensible regulatory program through the SGIS process. My comments should be considered preliminary. Our member companies are in the process of reviewing and assessing all the issues included in this most recent document. Therefore, my remarks reflect a general overall statement relative to 4 main issues. Comparing the 2009 SGIS document to the one released in September 2011, DEC has made significant changes and additional prohibitions with expanded setbacks that remove drilling and production efficiencies from the process. For example, a 640-acre drilling unit can be efficiently drained of natural gas by horizontal wells occupying a 5-acre drilling pad at the end of a rectangular unit. With the proposed setbacks and prohibitions, the same 640-acre drilling unit will be fragmented into smaller units so that additional wells would need to be drilled, thereby creating more surface disturbances at multiple drilling sites. While DEC has for decades past developed an extensive regulatory framework with an enviable environmental record, it now proposes to impose excessive permitting and regulatory requirements with questionable environmental benefits, such as unwarranted exclusions and additional requirements for studies in grassland and forest focus areas. Each application to drill a well must include a number of plans to address issues that have not been justified in the document and may be of questionable legal authority. Nowhere in the document is there a clear table and flow chart of what is required in a permit application to drill a well. More importantly, there are both internal and external points of approval with specific reports, plans, and requirements. There are no timeframes associated with approvals to be obtained from both inside and outside the DEC. Therefore, there is a great deal of regulatory uncertainty in the process. Finally, as an overarching comment, the industry believes that the current statutory framework vests exclusive authority to regulate high-volume hydraulic fracturing in the state, and that to date this framework has protected the state's drinking water and other natural resources. All that we ask is that the final regulatory framework at the state level reflects a comprehensive understanding of how the industry operates and that the natural gas industry continue to provide desired economic benefits and a much-needed energy resource. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to remind speakers, if you have prepared written comments, you could leave them with the stenographer. And we now have William, I'm sorry, sir, DeRosier? DeRosier. And you'll be followed by Lori Wheelock, or Wheelock.
Ready? My name is Bill DeRosier, and I'm a field director for Energy in Depth. Currently, I live in Harveys Lake, Pennsylvania, but I grew up in New York, where my family has mined and quarried for about 30 years now. So I feel comfortable in saying that the DEC can efficiently conduct and regulate natural resource development. And I feel so with natural gas as well. In Pennsylvania, I have the unique pleasure of watching natural gas develop around me every day in places like Montrose, Dimock, Towanda. I see the jobs, the road infrastructure, the good stewardship and citizen nature of these companies. In particular, I would like to talk about the road use agreements. I'd like to talk about the road use agreements that many of the communities are entering in down in Pennsylvania. To date, since May of 2011, the industry has spent about $411 million rebuilding and repairing roads of which that they worked on, destroyed a little bit, but they rebuilt up for the communities that they operate in. In that same region, sorry, I'm going off track here. Oh, in a comparable region in New York State currently, the Department of Transportation's budget is only about $80 million. And being that, stuck here. So the use, if natural gas industry was allowed to come to New York, they would receive many of the same benefits that communities in Pennsylvania are already receiving through the use of road use agreements. So I encourage that the Supplemental Generic Environmental Impact Study continue to investigate and employ the use of road use agreements, many of which towns in New York are already starting to look at and develop. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Lori Wheelock, to be followed by Margaret Tan.
Good evening. My name is Lori Wheelock. I currently live and work in Brooklyn, New York as an environmental attorney, but I was born and raised in the Southern Tier in Endicott, and it really is the town that made me who I am today. Watching the environmental degradation, the numerous Superfund sites, and major corporations who got their start in upstate New York but pull out and take jobs with them or send them overseas really showed me how much we need our government and our community to work together to protect and to better upstate New York. And with that, I just have a few comments. I'll also be submitting written comments on the SGIS. The first, and we've heard it put so well tonight, we really need a comprehensive health assessment, and the Department of Health should be working with DEC in conjunction to create such a report. Second, if hydrofracking can be done in such a safe manner, then why not consider creating something like an escrow account per gas lease? That way the gas industry can put money in per each well. If something were to happen, like we saw in Dish, Texas, or Dimock, Pennsylvania, then at least the funds would be there immediately to assist the landowners. On top of that, someone mentioned earlier jobs. Well, where else will we get jobs from? Well, we're at an interesting point in our environmental, consideration here, where we can look at the statewide system at the time and kind of take a path. We can put our funding and our research and our efforts into things like geothermal and solar, and we also should be looking at a legislative level at talking with our elected officials about what upstate needs. If that's putting funding into agriculture and helping the farms that have been here for generations, then that should be a consideration. Now, another issue about jobs is we saw with the recent flooding in upstate New York, a lot of families, for example, the families in Owego, when the flooding occurred, weren't able to find temporary housing. A lot of the hotels were overrun by transient workers who are now doing gas drilling in Bradford County, Pennsylvania. So for all the jobs, and a lot of talk about how many jobs will come into New York State with this, the question is that the real numbers? Is that really what's going to happen? Lastly, I was pretty much, I guess, disappointed tonight that Senator Libous wasn't here. Maybe he submitted comments previously, and I hope that he did. But he came out with a news article a couple weeks ago where he told the rest of the state to stay out of the gas drilling debate and to leave it to upstate New York to work out. And that's really disappointing because what happens up here will impact the rest of the state. So I urge him to create those comments, to send them, and for his constituents to reach out to his office, because honestly, this is not just DEC, this is the rest of the state. This is our Senate, this is our Assembly, and our governor need to respond to this issue. With that, on that note,
Excuse me, that was inappropriate, sir.
Oh, that's quite all right. I love upstate. I would love to move back.
Your time is up, however, ma'am.
I will see you in New York City on November 30th.
The next... Oh, sorry.